Hello, my beautiful friends, my fellow space blobs and sparkly blobs and earth blobs and all the forms that are gathering here in this moment as we sit here. I am coming into this chat today as a very, very sensitive blob. I had a really tough night last night in my haunted house, which happens from time to time. Last night was a really, really intense one where I was just witnessing some of my deep fears, some of the most vulnerable places in myself, and sitting with some of my fears of abandonment and lovability and worthiness, really, really deep themes. And I think that's so fitting coming into our chat about Cancer season, feeling tender, feeling like I've sat with very tender parts of myself that need love, that need that nectar of life to be fed back to them. Because for me, Cancer is so much about that deep witnessing. It's about how we come home to ourselves, how we find home in that. And a part of that is going to be allowing for some of our shadows and the places we're haunted to be taken care of, but also in just the emotional integrity of allowing ourselves to feel what we need to feel and take a moment to feel that so powerfully and deeply. There are a lot of other themes for this Cancer season, of course. It's not just going to be sitting and feeling heavy emotions. There's going to be so many dynamics to this highly intuitive and powerful season. And I just want to make today just like a warm hug, a warm, creative, vibrant hug for all of us who are feeling through this very intense year. So grab your tea or your art project or your blanket or your cozy whatever, or get ready to go for a walk, whatever you like to do when you're spending time with me. I'm going to just talk about some of the big intuitive themes I'm noticing, some of the transits, and we'll end with a beautiful intuitive card reading. And I hope that we all feel a little bit of a breath of relief and care by the time we come to the end of this chat today. The deeper I look at the archetype of Cancer and the longer I sit with it, the more it just fascinates me, because it's this cardinal water sign combining this idea of initiation, of beginning, of arriving and starting with this intuitive, watery mystery. And a lot of the imagery and energetics around Cancer have a lot to do with being able to move between the material and the immaterial world, in the spiritual and the physical world. Even in the representation of Cancer as the crab, crabs can be swimming through the ocean and then walking along the sand. They are intensely soft and vulnerable to the world and have this powerful shell. And I think there's such a beauty to that. It's also a sign ruled by the moon, which is always changing form. It never looks the same to our naked eye here on the earth as it's dance with us, and the sun keeps changing its form throughout every single month. And so for me, Cancer is such a wonderful representation of beginning, and that each beginning is a changing of the self and translation from our intuition into how we begin and how we take care of ourselves. The fourth sign of the zodiac here is also tied to themes of home and the non-public self, the private self. And that's so potent to me, because so much of our 21st century world and the immediacy of everything and social media and all of it is about our public self. And even historically, we can think about how much pressure was put on the public self, and what that looks like and what success looks like and who we need to be in the world. But when I really get down into the energetics of Cancer energy and this idea of the home, and myself as somebody who's not out there trying to be somebody all the time, I access something that's truest in me. I access what I really want, what I truly hope to create or experience in a life. I will often access levels of my intuition or my knowing that are only possible to access once I've taken myself out of the need to be somebody out in the world. The fourth sign is also about letting go of this hyper independence, where it's always about mastering everything on your own and never asking for help, never being vulnerable enough to say, I can't do this all on my own. And the truth and the care that's involved in those moments as well. So none of that rugged individualism, that performance of rugged individualism, of success, of certain beauty standards, of certain external appearances are as important here when we're working with the magic of the fourth house, of Cancer, of the moon, of the domestic, of the inner mothering. This is one of the deepest, most profound places we can go in the year. And I feel very strongly that many of us are longing for a greater dose of this energy in our lives because it's been so devalued over the last few centuries. Just even the concept of mothering, of the wild mother, of the deep mother, of the kind mother, all of these versions of that, of the fierce mother, have been put on the back burners, and many of us are longing for that magic to come back into our lives. So I think this is just one of the most important places that we can look, and it's so easy to overlook it because Cancer's so often stereotyped in very frustrating ways for me. Moody, led by emotions, nostalgic, unable to decide because they're always getting yanked around by their emotions. For me, that's such a reflection of our culture. The discomfort with emotional integrity, the discomfort with changing moods, changing seasons, changing the way our bodies show up week to week, how our needs change, the discomfort with actually listening and witnessing what our bodies need and our spirits need in any given moment and changing course based on that, because there's so much about maintaining and doing the thing at the same way for as long as possible. And when we're really reclaiming the magic, the wild mother magic of this sign, something really, really cool starts to happen. So let's talk about some of these big themes that I'm noticing for this Cancer season, because these themes just make me feel like I can breathe again. When I sit with them, when I feel them, there's this relief that comes through. So one of the first themes that I just really noticed with some of the energetics for this particular Cancer season is that what seems like it's going backward or regressing or seeming like it's not going forward the way that we want it to, like we might even feel like we are taking steps backward, is really going forward. This is one of my favorite things to think about in life because our culture really loves a nice linear path with a success story, a little hero's journey climax with a resolution and a result and a product to sell and all of that good stuff. And of course, that doesn't feed our souls, because that's only true on one little level. And so I think this season, many of us are going to be feeling like maybe we are going back, maybe we are regressing, and maybe we don't even know what we're doing. Maybe it felt like we had all the answers figured out a few months ago, and now it feels like we have even less figured out than we ever thought we did. Everybody's going to be experiencing this differently. It might be an emotional healing, it might be a practical question you're having. But the thing is that a lot of times those places where we feel like we're retracting or we're going back, we're doing something important. We're creating and we're adding ingredients that we didn't know we needed. And just because it's not valued by the external world that's obsessed with outward functioning and outward success, quote unquote, doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't have deep meaningful value. So when you feel like you're having a day or a moment where it feels like you are doing less than you should be doing, or you feel like you have less answers or fewer answers than you would like to be having, remember that there's actually something important going on there that is integral to what is next, and that it's actually helping us to move forward in a really, really meaningful way. So we don't have to resist that part of ourselves. It makes me think about today as I'm sitting here having that haunted house time last night. There's a part of me that feels like that's me regressing because I had another haunted house night. I'm supposed to have been moving beyond this as I accept myself and as I heal and as I accept my, neurotype and who I am. But you know what? Visiting that haunted house last night was very important for me because it helped me understand really key important points of myself. So that's going to help me keep understanding my journey at a really profound level. So that's the first one. The second theme that came up for me is that, like I was mentioning, Cancer isn't about who we look like to the outside world. It's about who we are when we don't have the costume on, when we aren't that rugged individualist who can get everything done. It's about the version of us that we are when we sit down quietly and we think about what we want to do in the day without any expectations. It's the things that we long for when we lay down at night, or when we wake up first thing in the morning, or we wake up in the middle of the night. It's the longings and the dreams that we have and that we're holding in our bodies, in our emotional selves, that need witnessing and care. So letting those truest things carry us, letting that joy of those true things carry us is so important right now. Creating spaces for that is what is going to help us figure out what we need to begin, what we need to initiate, what we need to take seriously, what we need to allow time to blossom and flower into. And it is going to challenge the things that maybe look good as success on the external front. And it might even challenge taking time to do those things and like say, don't do that today. I know it looks good. I know it feels like you're ticking a box, but you may need to take step backs from things that look good on the surface, but don't feel so good. There's going to be a dialogue going on there with those elements. The third theme is nostalgia, one of my favorite topics. I could talk about nostalgia all day because I find it fascinating. I'm a personally very nostalgic person. I have my Venus in Cancer, and I'm very attached and connected to this energy. And I've always been just the most nostalgic person since I came out into the world that way. I just was born that way. But nostalgia to me is so important because what we're nostalgic about is an important indicator of what needs expression in our lives now. Whether that's a feeling, an environment, an atmosphere, a food, a creation, a way we need to mother ourselves. Maybe we long for a feeling we had about a deep belonging or a deep sense of trust or safety in our lives. And I know we idealize the past. And that can, of course, lead us into thinking that it was all the best days are behind us, and we don't want to take nostalgia there. But nostalgia is often guiding us to what we want to be doing for ourselves today. So if you are a nostalgic person like me, this is a great season to really reflect on how you can honor those nostalgic ingredients now and use them to mother yourself in this moment in your life. The final theme, this one's so important for Cancer, and it's one that I think sometimes gets overlooked because of that watery, mysterious, Cancerian, domestic, private element that is about Cancer, but Cancer is also a cardinal sign. It's also a beginner, an initiator, a translator of that deep unconscious. And that means that this is a season that we activate our courage to begin a project, to begin an idea. And this is very deeply linked to inner judgment. This has been a theme that's been coming up for me a lot because for me, what's really interesting is the antidote to inner judgment is a deep sense of inner mothering and care and compassion for ourselves and therefore for others. But we live in a very judgmental world, especially with the internet and this freedom and this overfamiliarity that comment sections have and people have for saying what they think of everybody. We're also used to judging ourselves, and then the internet's this big judgment platform. I just saw a person who was sharing their lovely recipe to their audience, that had all these ingredients in it. And the entire comment section, I just wanted to look to see if they had any recommendations for, add additions or ideas, what people were feeling about the recipe. And everybody was just critiquing this person's appearance, how she was using her knife, what ingredient she was using in there because it didn't specifically fit this person's diet and it was so problematic. She would even post a recipe that wasn't relevant to this person, the way she touched her hand to her hip. I was shocked at the amount of comments that had nothing to do with this recipe and had everything to do with this deep wave of judgment. And it's so intrinsic to this culture that this is a really important time to release any judgments about ourselves and our longings to begin certain things, the timing that it might have, when we're doing it in the context of our lives, if we feel like we're starting it super late or we should have started it earlier, or it seems foolish to begin now. This is a really great time to witness ourselves, mother ourselves, notice the judging voices that are saying those things to ourselves, and start to begin in ways that feel sustainable. Whether that is beginning shifting something over, beginning clearing a little bit of space, begin writing something, begin creating something, begin a series of conversations. This is a really beautiful time to begin. Let's dive into just a few of the transits I think are really interesting for this Cancer season and illuminate some of these themes that I've just been expressing. So the moon cycle is one of the most interesting parts of this Cancer season because we are getting 2 full moons in Capricorn during this Cancer season, one on June 21st right at the beginning and one on July 21st right at the end. Every year there's one sign that gets 2 full moons. This year it's Capricorn. These Capricorn full moons are very illuminating for what looks like external success, and productivity, and all of these trappings that so many of us have been taught to hold on to and question it and release it and release the demand for this kind of extractive productivity that we've all been so trained to live with over all of these years. Those full moons are so healing and really, really important. I am just in love. And the Cancer new moon is also going to help us with that, but kind of bathing us in this watery, beautiful, intuitive knowing about what's really calling our souls forward. It just reminds me of swimming in the ocean, surrounded by bioluminescence, and feeling really carried by that's going to be so beautiful as we move through that moon cycle this month. Really, really important. Another factor that's playing through during this Cancer season is that both Saturn and Neptune, who are both in Pisces right now, are going to move retrograde. Saturn on June 29th and Neptune on July 2nd. So we have these 2 planets in Pisces, another watery, deeply spiritual, intuitive, unconscious realm of dreaming placements, moving retrograde. Saturn retrograde is often associated with this idea of like blockages showing up everywhere and feeling frustrated, like you can't get things done. But what I want us all to kind of remember about something like Saturn is that it's about letting go of this idea of this is what productivity looks like. This is what value looks like. It's about challenging all of that and looking in different places for our deep sense of our core values, what's really calling to us, and reconsidering what a meaningful life looks like over the next few months as we work with that Saturn retrograde. The Neptune retrograde is also really, really helpful. It's going, I think, until December this year. And that Neptune retrograde in Pisces is going to help us understand what it is that we are ready to change, to shift, what we are ready to acknowledge, what we are ready to see clearly and move through. So those transits are going to be really beautiful. One final thing I wanted to bring up, speaking of kind of bigger, important energies for this Cancer season, is going to be Lilith, Dark Moon Lilith, moving into Libra at the very end of June, around June 30th. This is so important to me, this Lilith placement, because we also have the South Node in Libra right now, which is really interesting. And these 2 work very, very well together because they're both kind of interested in challenging the way things have been set up. Lilith and Libra, starting off here in the very beginning of July, is going to be challenging once again, where we feel we have to people please, where we feel we have to sustain a certain role, a certain identity, a certain way we look, a certain way we appear, a certain way that we please the world, and the way that we try and just keep the peace just because we don't want to be judged, because we don't want to be cast out by the larger group, because maybe we want to feel safe. It's just going to be a really, really deep time of exploring those themes. I will probably come back around to that topic, actually. Is anybody interested in me doing a Lilith chat here in this space? Because we could definitely do that. I could also do another Saturn chat and just talk about that. Let me know. And if you want more guidance every single week over my Patreon, I go through what's going on each week by week, and we feel through it intuitively together. So if you're curious, please join me over there and I will be happy to offer up a little bit more comfort and support. So those are some of the really big things happening during this Cancer season that are working with kind of some of this challenging of productive culture, of this kind of performance culture that we live in, and the judgments that come with it. It's a really, really powerful season. It's one that I'm just personally, I'm needing it. I'm needing to think about these things. And like I said, my haunted house last night was just all about my fears of abandonment in not performing the way I think I need to perform, and how deep that all goes. It sneaks up on you, and this culture really does, feed you messages constantly about how important it is to keep up that appearance and how important it is to keep up that production, or you will be abandoned. And it's just fascinating. It's fascinating to think about. It's important to witness. And so many of us are just needing that wild mothering and that wild care of the heart, and feeding the haunted parts of ourselves some really deep love. So let's see what cards want to come out. 9 of Swords is so perfect. It's probably my energy because it was definitely a 9 of Swords night last night. But I think this is important. Here's the witnessing. 9 of Swords is one of my favorite cards to work with because it's something that we all contend with at different parts of our lives. It's so innate to the experience of living in this world. And yet we feel like we should get to this point where it's never an ingredient in the process. Temperance. I love that. I love a good temperance moment. Temperance is tied to this Iris, the messenger goddess who rides a rainbow around to give messages to everybody. And it's just this is so interesting to me. This is such an interesting combo. Let's pull one final card to complete our chat today. And 4 of Swords. So interesting here. What I see here is calibration, integration. I'm getting full body shivers. This is so powerful. There's something important going on here with witnessing the ingredients that we have with ourselves in this season. So often it feels like we need to produce a version of ourselves in the future that's going to have the ingredients that we need in order to be where we think we need to be, etc. And these cards are telling me that this Cancer season, we have so much more of what we need to figure out the next steps in our lives than we ever realized. So let's talk about this. 9 of Swords is a very important witnessing card. There's a couple levels to this because on the one hand, this is about recognizing that we are going to have a busy mind that likes to tell a lot of stories, and will take, one piece of information and could weave, 50 scary stories about why you're not safe or you'll be abandoned or whatever is worrying you. So that's like one side of this card. And just acknowledging that is so freeing, right? Like most of us are going to have that experience pretty regularly and might be grappling with it. And just knowing that is freeing. The other side of this though, and I think this is a really, really important one, is that the figure sitting here with their head in their hands, feeling a deep emotions and witnessing these swords, these stories, these ideas in their mind and in their body and witnessing their emotions are doing something really, really sacred. This figure is allowing there to be space for energy, emotions, old stories to be witnessed and moved through. And that's the other side of this. And in doing that, it might feel like we're regressing. It might feel like we're going back over the same ground over again, but we're not. There's something opening up, and that's where it leads to this Temperance card, which is this alchemist messenger energetic. This is a card very deeply associated with working with the physical and non-physical, translating what we know in our deep selves to the world, and that we don't need to wait for some perfect time to do that. That we are allowed to express that now. Temperance card is a really, really, really joyful energy. It's what we love to do. It's what just feels natural to each of us. It's what just feels good. It's not more complicated than that. And our judgment culture and our guilt and shame culture will say that is not enough. And if, there's a lot of suffering in the world, it's a very complex place we are living in. And that is true. But it's also true that you're allowed to love what you love and want to bring some of that to life. Let yourself. And then finally, we have Four of Swords, which is a card of deep rest and integration. And this is so interesting that this card's coming up because it didn't even come up in kind of my intuitive theme conversation. But I think it is important right now. This season, so many of us are integrating how we've changed, how the world's changed, how the energies have changed. A lot of us have gone through huge expansion since Gemini season, since Jupiter in Gemini, since even Pisces season, as we've been shifting into some new energetic chapters. And a lot of us are actually going to need to take time to integrate. And we just need it. We just need it. Fours in tarot, a lot of people will resist them, all the fours, because they're about taking a pause. And our culture says, you got to be extracting from yourself. But this card challenges all of that. So I just find this to be such an interesting reading. Witnessing, integrating, expression. Those three things go so well together. I am continuing our Summer of the Wild Dreamer over on my Patreon. We are just doing beautiful practices to come back into our wild nature, into our playfulness, reclaiming those little moments of joy. I made these practices to bring myself back to joy, bring myself back to creative feelings of liberation, and I wanted to share it with my patrons. So if you're over on Patreon, I highly recommend checking that out. Like I said, we also do weekly chats every week where I go a lot more detailed into each week and each week's energies and what's going on and how we can listen to our intuition more. And you can check out my entire journey through the major arcana over there as well if you're interested in learning about those. So many resources there. I love it when you stick around here. I hope to see you here for our next chat. We have so much to move through during this Cancer season, and I appreciate every single one of you. Truly, it means the world, and it's been amazing to just get to sit here on a morning when I'm feeling quite tender and just share this time with you all. I'm sending you so much love.